You fix internet cables. The woman asked, barefoot in the doorway of a 3-story townhouse that looked way out of place in this part of Brooklyn. Yeah, Yarden Daniels said, shifting his 5-year-old son in his arms. Well, sometimes, depends what's broken. The woman's eyes flicked to the little boy clinging to his shoulder, then back to him. It's just not connecting. I've tried resetting it, nothing. You were fixing Mrs. Lopez's yesterday, right? Yeah, I was. He hesitated, looking down at his son. Look, I've got my kid with me. If that's a problem, I can come back later. The woman stepped aside. It's fine, come in. Yarden set his son, Brice, down inside the foyer. Don't touch anything, okay, buddy? Just sit here with your truck. Brice nodded, already pulling a little red plastic fire truck from his backpack. The woman led Yarden through a sleek, minimalist living room. Everything was so clean, like hotel clean, marble counters, polished floors. Art on the walls that didn't look like it came from Target. The kind of place that made Yarden feel like his work boots were too loud just by existing. He crouched beside the modem tucked behind a custom cabinet. You live here alone? He asked, pulling out a screwdriver. Yeah, she said. Big place. The woman didn't answer. Instead, she crossed her arms and leaned against the wall, watching him. She wore a loose white t-shirt and jeans that somehow looked expensive. Her hair was tied up, and she wasn't wearing makeup, but there was something about her quiet confidence that made her hard to look away from. I'm Yarden, by the way, he said, glancing up at her. And that little guy out front is Brice. She blinked like she hadn't expected him to offer that. Gianna Oakley. He nodded, nice to meet you. It took him 10 minutes to realize the router was fine. It was the cable feeding into it from the wall that had been chewed through. Likely a mouse or maybe something heavier. You got pets? He asked. Gianna frowned. No. Well, something's been nibbling on your wires. I've got spare cable in the van. Be right back. Brice looked up as Yarden passed. Dad, is she nice? Yarden chuckled. Yeah, she's nice. Don't go wandering, all right. When he returned with the cable, Gianna was sitting on the floor beside Brice, listening to him explain how his fire truck saved a whole school of kids last week. Her laugh was soft, surprised, like she hadn't used it in a while. Your dad's a superhero, she told Brice. Brice beamed. He fixes everything. Yarden's hands stilled for a second. He cleared his throat and got back to work. 20 minutes later, the internet was up and running. He packed his tools, wiping his hands on his jeans. You're all set. Gianna stood. Let me pay you. Nah, he said, waving a hand. It was simple, just the cable. She frowned. You sure? Yeah, you let my kid sit inside your house and talk your ear off. We're good. Gianna watched him for a long moment. Can I at least say thank you with coffee, or something? Yarden hesitated. He hadn't had a real break all day. Brice tugged his sleeve. Can we stay, Dad? She has pretzels. That made Gianna laugh again. I do, actually. Yarden gave in. All right, just a few minutes. They sat at the marble kitchen island, while Brice munched on pretzels and Gianna poured coffee into mugs that probably cost more than Yarden made in a day. So you do handiwork full-time? She asked. Whatever I can get. I used to do construction, then my wife walked out 2 years ago, just me and Brice now. He sipped his coffee. It's work when I find it. Some days are good, some days. He trailed off. Gianna looked at the little boy now spinning in a bar stool. He's sweet. He's everything. She smiled, but there was something in her eyes like she understood that too well. What about you? He asked. What do you do? She paused like she had to think about how to answer. I run a tech company. Oh yeah, that's cool. Like websites and stuff. Something like that. Yarden didn't press. He had no time for tech talk anyway. The coffee was good, though, better than any he'd had in months. Gianna watched him carefully. You ever taken a break? He raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I mean, do you ever go out for yourself? He laughed once. I've got a 5-year-old and a busted water heater. The last time I took a break, it was because passed out on the couch. Gianna stared at her mug. Maybe you should take a break, I mean. There was something about her voice that made that sound less like a suggestion and more like a quiet plea. He stood, brushing his hands on his jeans. Thanks for the coffee. She followed him to the door, Brice skipping ahead. If you ever need anything fixed again, just let me know. I will. He turned to go, but she stopped him. Yarden. He looked back. Do you like Italian? He blinked, yeah. There's a place down on Delancey. Best pasta in the city. Maybe you and Brice would like to join me there sometime. Yarden frowned. Likes dinner. Gianna looked almost shy. Yeah, dinner. He smiled, unsure what was happening but not hating it. Yes, okay. As they walked back to his truck, Brice tugged his sleeve again. Dad, is she a princess? Yarden chuckled. Why do you say that? She has shiny floors, and she smells nice. He laughed. Maybe. What Yarden didn't know, what he couldn't have guessed, was that Gianna Oakley wasn't just some woman with shiny floors. She was the founder and CEO of Oakley Systems, a billion-dollar tech firm. She wasn't just offering dinner. She was already falling. Yarden stood in front of the mirror in his cramped bathroom, trying to decide if shaving would make him look more like a man who belonged at a restaurant that served wine without screw caps. Brice was in the living room, humming to himself while building a tower out of couch cushions and plastic dinosaurs. Dad, he called, do you think she'll have chocolate cake? I thought you said you didn't like chocolate cake. I like it if it's fancy. Yarden shook his head, running a hand through his hair. He hadn't been on a real date since Brice's mother left. Not that this was a date. Probably. He had no idea what this was. Just dinner. With a woman who lived in a townhouse that could eat his apartment for breakfast. He checked the time again. He didn't want to be early, but he sure as hell didn't want to be late. He pulled on the only button-down shirt he had that didn't have a paint stain on it and prayed the collar didn't look too wrinkled. By the time they arrived at the place on Delancey, Brice had fallen asleep in the back seat. Yarden gently lifted him out, resting his little head on his shoulder as they approached the entrance. A valet in a black vest stepped forward, and Yarden hesitated. I'm just dropping off, he said quickly. Before the guy could respond, the glass doors opened, and Gianna stepped out. I figured you might need a hand, she said, smiling as she came toward them. Yarden blinked. She was wearing black slacks and a silky top that shimmered slightly under the streetlights. Her hair was down this time, and it struck him how different she looked outside her house, like someone who belonged on the cover of a magazine or maybe on a stage with cameras flashing. You didn't have to come out, he said. I wanted to, she replied, then looked down at Brice. Long day. Always. She nodded toward the restaurant. They've got a private booth in the back, quiet, comfortable. Inside, the lighting was low and warm, and the maitre d' greeted Gianna by name before leading them through the main dining room. Heads turned as they passed people in suits and dresses, phones on the table next to wine glasses and oysters. Yarden kept his eyes forward, pretending not to notice. The booth was tucked behind a panel of frosted glass. Brice stirred as Yarden slid into the leather seat, then yawned and blinked up at Gianna. Hi again, he said. Hey, Brice, she replied, settling into the seat across from them. I think they have chocolate cake. His eyes lit up. Fancy chocolate cake. The fanciest. Brice grinned and rested his head on Yarden's arm. Yarden glanced across the table, unsure where to start. "So," he said finally, "you come here often." Gianna laughed softly. "Only when I need to bribe someone." "Is this a bribe?" "Maybe, depends how much you like mushroom risotto." He opened his mouth to respond, but the waiter appeared with menus and a bottle of wine. Gianna ordered without looking, and the waiter vanished like he knew better than to linger. Yarden watched her. "You don't look like someone who needs to bribe anybody." She tilted her head. "What do I look like?" He hesitated, like someone who doesn't usually invite strange men to dinner. "Maybe I don't," she toyed with the edge of her napkin, "but you're not that strange. I fix wires and live in a building where the elevator hasn't worked since January." Gianna's gaze held his. "That doesn't make you strange, that makes you real." He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Brice perked up when the food arrived: pasta for him, steak for Yarden, risotto, and something with truffle oil for Gianna. The portions were small, but the flavors hit hard. Yarden wasn't used to eating food that came plated like artwork, but he couldn't deny it was good. Halfway through the meal, Brice leaned over and whispered, "Can I go to the bathroom?" Gianna stood before Yarden could. "I'll go with him, you eat." Yarden watched them disappear around the corner, then sat back and exhaled. The tablecloth was real linen. The cutlery gleamed. The wine was probably older than he was. He was in over his head. When they returned, Brice clambered back into the booth, and Gianna slid in next to him this time. She didn't say anything about the water on the front of her blouse, and Yarden didn't ask. After dessert, which did include chocolate cake, much to Brice's satisfaction, Gianna rested her chin on her hand and looked at Yarden. "You ever think about doing something else? Something other than fixing broken things?" "Yeah. I think about a lot of things," he said, "but thinking doesn't keep the lights on." "What if it could?" He frowned. "What do you mean?" She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "I've got a friend who runs a development project in Queens. They're looking for someone to manage site logistics. Pays well, benefits, weekends off." Yarden didn't touch the paper. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you're smart and capable, and maybe no one's offered before." He stared at her. "You don't know me." "Not yet," she said, then looked at Brice. "But I'd like to." Yarden didn't answer right away. He picked up the paper, glanced at the job description, then folded it again and tucked it into his pocket. The valet brought the truck around, and Gianna helped Brice into the back seat. Yarden turned to her. "I don't know what this is." Gianna nodded. "Neither do I." "But it's not just dinner." "No," she said, "it's not." He opened the driver's side door, then paused. "You're not what I expected." "Good," she said, "neither are you." As he pulled away, Brice yawned from the back seat. "Dad." "Yes, buddy. Can we have dinner with her again?" Yarden didn't answer, not because he didn't want to, but because he already knew the answer. And it scared him. Yarden hadn't expected to hear from Gianna again so soon. But 3 days after dinner, as he was balancing a ladder against an apartment building in Queens, he got a call from a number he didn't recognize. He climbed down, wiped the sweat from his brow, and answered. "Hey," Gianna said, "are you busy tonight?" He glanced at the coil of cable still waiting to be installed. "What's going on?" "There's an event, a launch party. I'm required to show up, but I'd rather not go alone." Yarden narrowed his eyes. "You sure you want me at something like that?" "You're the only person I want there." He didn't answer right away. "I've already arranged for a sitter," she added. "Someone I trust. She's worked with my team for years. That caught him off guard. You arranged a sitter for Brice. I figured if I waited for you to ask, I'd never get an answer. He exhaled. What kind of event is this? Black tie. He almost laughed. I don't even own a tie. Don't worry, she said. I've got that covered. That night, a courier arrived at his door with a garment bag and a small box. Inside was a tailored black tuxedo, a crisp white shirt, and cufflinks shaped like tiny compasses. Brice tugged at the jacket once Yarden had changed. You look like a movie person. Yarden looked at himself in the mirror. The jacket fit perfectly, the pants tailored to his legs like they'd been made for him, which they had. He didn't recognize the man staring back, but somehow, the expression in his eyes hadn't changed. The sitter arrived promptly at 6. Her name was May, and she greeted Brice like an old friend, kneeling to his eye level with a smile and a bag full of board games. Gianna's car pulled up 10 minutes later. Not her usual SUV, but a sleek black sedan with tinted windows and a driver in a suit. Yarden climbed in beside her, trying not to wrinkle the jacket. You clean up well, she said, taking him in from head to toe. He glanced at her, and for a moment, all sound seemed to fall away. She wore a midnight blue gown that shimmered like ink under moonlight, her hair swept to one side in soft waves. You too, he said. The venue was a rooftop garden in Midtown, surrounded by glass towers and crawling with people in gowns and tuxedos. Waiters floated past with silver trays, and a string quartet played near a reflecting pool lit from beneath. Yarden kept his hands in his pockets, feeling like a tourist in a city he wasn't meant to visit. Gianna leaned in. You're not here to impress anyone, just me. He relaxed barely. They moved through the crowd, Gianna greeting people with polite nods while Yarden tried to keep up. A man with salt and pepper hair approached, holding 2 crystal tumblers. Didn't expect to see you here, he said to Gianna. I almost didn't come, she replied, accepting a glass. The man turned to Yarden. You must be the one she's been talking about. Yarden blinked. I guess that depends what she said. The man laughed. Fair enough. I'm Marcus. I've known Gianna since we both had fewer wrinkles and worse ideas. Gianna rolled her eyes. Ignore him. He invests in everything and believes in nothing. Marcus raised his glass. That might be true, but I believe she's finally found someone interesting. He walked off before Yarden could respond. Gianna led him toward the edge of the terrace, where the city stretched out below them in glowing grids. You all right? She asked, watching his face. I've never been in a place like this. You've been in harder ones. He looked at her. Why me? She reached for his hand, her fingers cool against his. Because you're not afraid to be honest. You don't want anything from me, and you see the world differently. He studied their joined hands. You didn't tell me what this party's for. She hesitated. It's for the launch of a platform we've been developing for over a year. It's supposed to help small businesses manage supply chains more efficiently. He raised an eyebrow. Sounds like something I'd never use. Exactly, which is why I wanted you here, to remind me why I started this in the first place. A photographer passed by, raising a camera. Gianna gave a slight nod and the shutter clicked. Yarden looked uncomfortable. You're not going to end up in some magazine tomorrow, she said, unless you want to. I don't. Good, me neither. They stood in silence for a while, the city humming around them. You ever miss it? Yarden asked suddenly. Normal stuff. Gianna looked at him. Define normal. Like grocery shopping without people recognizing you, driving yourself around, making toast at 2 in the morning. She smiled faintly. Sometimes, but I think I miss what I never had more. And like what? A family that didn't treat affection like a transaction. A childhood that didn't come with press releases. She looked at him. People who don't lie just to stay close. He didn't reply. He just reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper from his inside pocket. The job offer. "I called the guy," he said. "Told him I'd come in Monday." Her eyes flickered. "You didn't have to do that for me." "I didn't," he said. "I did it because I want Brice to see me do something I'm proud of." She nodded, eyes shining. The music shifted behind them, and Gianna tilted her head. "Dance with me." Yarden glanced at the crowd. "I don't know how to dance." "I'll teach you." She led him to the center of the terrace, where other couples were already swaying. He placed one hand at her waist, the other in hers, and let her guide the rhythm. They didn't speak. The city moved around them, cars crawling below, planes blinking above, but none of it mattered. When the music faded, Gianna looked up at him. "I've never brought someone into my world like this before." "I've never stepped into one like this before," he replied. She reached up and brushed her fingers along his jaw. "I don't want this to be one night." "It won't be," he said, steady. She believed him. And for the first time in years, so did he. The next time Yarden saw Gianna, it wasn't at her townhouse or a rooftop party. It was in Queens, on a dusty job site surrounded by scaffolding and the rhythmic thud of boots against concrete. He was directing a small crew, clipboard in hand, when a black SUV pulled up to the chain-link fence. She stepped out wearing jeans and a navy blazer, her hair tied back, sunglasses shielding her eyes from the afternoon sun. "You're early," he said, walking toward her, brushing sawdust off his hands. "I figured if I waited until 5, you'd be buried in paperwork." He took a moment to look at her. "Didn't think this place was your style." "It's not," she admitted, "but you are." She followed him through the site, weaving around piles of rebar and half-framed walls. He pointed out parts of the structure as they walked: the future gym, the finished electrical room, the elevator shaft that had finally passed inspection. "I like seeing where things begin," she said, watching a forklift crawl across the gravel. "Everything else in my life tends to show up already polished." He led her into the temporary trailer that served as his office. It was small, cramped, and smelled faintly of coffee and drywall dust. She didn't seem to mind. He poured her a paper cup of water from the dispenser. "You didn't just come to see the site," he said. "No," she said, "I wanted to talk to you." He leaned back against the desk. "About?" "I had a board meeting this morning. They want me to relocate. San Francisco, 6 months minimum." His jaw tightened. "When?" "End of the quarter." He crossed his arms. "You already decide." "I told them I needed time." He nodded slowly. "You thinking about going?" "I don't know," she said. "It's a big opportunity. Strategic partnerships, new investors, a chance to scale everything we've been building." "But..." She looked at him. "But I finally found something that doesn't need scaling." He didn't move. The hum of the generator outside filled the silence between them. "I don't want to leave you and Brice," she said, "but also can't pretend this isn't a huge part of who I am." He stepped away from the desk and stood in front of her. "I don't want to be the reason you give up anything." "You wouldn't be," she said, "but I've spent most of my life making decisions alone. This time, I don't want to." He ran a hand down his jaw. "Brice's school year ends in June. I could look for temporary work out there. We could see what it's like." Her eyes widened. "You'd consider it?" "I'd consider a lot of things for the right reasons." Gianna took a breath, something shifting in her expression. "I've never had someone offer to bend their world for mine." Yarden gave a small shrug. "You've been bending yours every day since we met." She reached for his hand. "I don't want to lose what we're building." You won't, he said, but I need to know you're not running just because it's easier than staying. Gianna looked down at their joined hands. I've been running my whole life. You Brice, it's the first thing that's made me want to stop. That night, she came over to his apartment. Brice had built a fort out of chairs and blankets in the living room, and Gianna crawled inside without hesitation, even when she bumped her head on a folding chair. Do you think stars can move? Brice asked, lying on a pillow, peering at glow in the dark stickers on the ceiling. Gianna stretched out beside him. I think they move all the time, we just don't always see it. Yarden watched from the doorway, arms crossed, heart full. Later, after Brice was asleep and the apartment quiet, Gianna stood in the kitchen, her fingers tracing the edge of the counter. I called Marcus, she said, told him I'm putting the relocation on hold. Yarden stepped behind her. You sure? I'm sure I want to try this, all of it, not just the parts that look good in a quarterly report. He turned her to face him. This isn't going to be easy. I don't need easy, she said. I just need real. He kissed her then, slow and certain like a promise. 2 months later, the three of them stood beneath a string of lights in a friend's backyard. Gianna wore a pale dress and no shoes, and Brice stood proudly between them, holding a small velvet box. Yarden took it, opened it, and pulled out a ring he'd saved for quietly every week since that night on the job site. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't branded, but it was his. You changed everything, he said, voice low. Gianna's eyes filled. So did you. He slid the ring onto her finger. They didn't need a crowd or a cathedral. Just each other. And a love that didn't care what the world expected. The first time they sat together at a parent-teacher conference, Gianna tapped her pen nervously against her planner, while Yarden flipped through a pamphlet about a spring field trip to the botanical gardens. Do you think he'll actually sit through a whole lesson on pollination? She whispered. He once spent 40 minutes explaining how spaghetti is made of noodle worms, Yarden said. So I'd say it's 50-50. Gianna grinned and leaned closer, her shoulder brushing his. We'll bring extra snacks. That usually buys attention. The teacher sat across from them and smiled warmly. Brice is curious, bright, and a natural leader. He's also very passionate about fire trucks. Yarden chuckled. That tracks. He mentioned his mom's company saved a school from running out of computers, the teacher added. Gianna blinked. Oh, that might have been exaggerated. Well, he's proud of you, both of you. Afterward, they walked hand in hand to the car while Brice waited at home with May, now a regular part of their lives. The night air was cool, and the streetlights cast soft shadows along the pavement. He called you Mom, Yarden said quietly. Gianna nodded. I didn't want to make it a thing. It is a thing. She stopped walking. Is that okay with you? Yarden's voice was low. It's more than okay. The following weekend, they attended a community fundraiser organized by the Construction Sites Development Board. Yarden had helped them coordinate materials and volunteers, and when he walked into the community center with Gianna on one side and Brice on the other, a few of his coworkers raised eyebrows. But no one said anything when Brice climbed onto the stage to hand out raffle tickets with Gianna crouched beside him, whispering encouragements. Later, as Yarden helped stack folding chairs, a woman named Ruth, a longtime site manager, walked over. Didn't think I'd see you with someone like her, she said, nodding toward Gianna, who was helping a kid tape up a poster. I didn't either, Yarden replied. Ruth leaned on a chair. You two seem solid. He watched Gianna laugh as a little girl accidentally stuck a sticker to her forehead. We are. That night, Yarden brought out a small wooden box he'd kept tucked in his closet since Brice was born. Inside were old photos, a few baby shoes, and a letter he had written but never sent to Brice's mother. He sat on the floor beside the couch while Gianna folded laundry. "I want you to see this," he said, holding out the box. She paused, then set the clothes aside and knelt beside him. One by one, she looked through the contents, thumbed the photos, read the letter, held the tiny shoes in her palm. "I didn't know if I could do it alone," he said, "but I had to." Gianna met his eyes. "You didn't do it alone, you had him. And now I have you." She leaned in and kissed him slow, sure, and full of the gratitude that had no words. Spring arrived with early blooms and weekend soccer games. Brice joined a local team, and Gianna never missed a single match, even when it meant taking calls from the sidelines with a whistle around her neck and orange slices in a Ziploc bag at her feet. One Sunday afternoon, after Brice had scored his first goal, they took him out for ice cream. He sat on the bench between them, licking mint chocolate chip and kicking his legs. "Are you going to marry her?" Brice asked Yarden, squinting into the sunlight. Yarden blinked. "What makes you ask that?" "Because she already acts like my mom, and she makes pancakes better than you." Gianna choked on her cone. Yarden cleared his throat. "Well, maybe I should ask her." Brice's eyes widened. "Right now?" Gianna laughed. "I think he means in general." "No," Yarden said, "I mean right now." He stood, brushed his hands on his jeans, and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Gianna stared. "You're not serious." "I'm completely serious." He dropped to one knee in front of the bench. Brice gasped so loudly a woman walking her dog turned to stare. "I didn't know what I was walking into when I fixed your cable," Yarden said. "But I know now what I've found. You brought light into our home. You taught me that love doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real." Gianna's eyes filled. "You already had my yes." He opened the box. A delicate ring with a curved diamond, nestled in a gold setting, sparkled in the sun. "But I want to hear it again," he said. "Yes," she whispered, 1,000 times yes." Brice threw his arms around both of them, ice cream forgotten. That summer, they exchanged vows in a small garden surrounded by family, friends, co-workers, and a very proud 5-year-old in a miniature suit. The ceremony was simple, the words heartfelt, and the moment Gianna knelt to Brice and promised to always be his safe place made half the crowd cry. They moved into a brownstone not far from Gianna's old townhouse, still in Brooklyn, but with a yard big enough for Brice to run laps in and a workshop out back where Yarden built furniture on weekends. Gianna scaled back her travel, choosing to expand her company at a pace that let her be home every night for dinner. Some days were hectic, some were chaotic, but every night ended with Brice tucked between them reading stories, and every morning began with coffee and soft kisses in the kitchen before the day rushed in. One evening, as Brice fell asleep on the couch after a movie marathon, Gianna rested her head on Yarden's shoulder. "Do you ever miss your old life?" she asked. He kissed her temple, "Not for a second." She smiled, eyes closed. "Neither do I." He pulled a blanket over Brice and wrapped his arm around her waist, holding her close. In a world full of broken things, they had built something unshakable. Together,